There we go. Recording in progress has started. Probably a pop-up for you. So just quick stuff. I want to go through this very quickly. You are welcome to check out our community agreement at bit.ly IEH24 agreements. I will post that link in the chat. You're welcome here regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, identity, sexual orientation, ability, disability. Everybody's welcome in this space. Please try to make space for others. Critique ideas, not people. Assume positive intentions. Participate to the extent that makes you comfortable. Aim to be accessible. Please describe your visuals. Oops, wrong button, Ken. Closed captions are available. You can turn them on yourself. We ask for permission if we plan to record, and I already did that. You're welcome to have your camera, mic on or off. Breakout rooms usually include a quiet room, which I generally appreciate when I'm in these sessions. And you can talk to me about that if you would like. And message me privately on Zoom here if you need any support, technical, accessibility, emotional, or any other kind. Please join the Discord that I helped set up. It's a community space that we can communicate through. You should have all these instructions in email, so I don't want to continue too long going through all those details. I'd rather pass over control to my colleague Jenny and her cohort here.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, everyone. So what we're going to do is we'll do really brief introductions of myself and the student team. And then as we go throughout the day, we'll have you introducing yourselves and chatting. This will be an interactive session, but there's always an opportunity for you to do the activities as an individual as opposed to as a group. So please don't worry at all if what you've got capacity for today is just sort of hanging out. You're always welcome in MYFest. So I'll start. I'm Jennie Blake. I'm at the University of Manchester Library, and I'm what's called head of teaching and learning development. But really, that just means I get involved in all the teaching the library does. And one of my favorite things, it is my very favorite thing, is the fact that I get to be the strategic lead for the University of Manchester Library student team. So today we have 3 representatives of the student team. I'm just going to go in order on my screen, everybody. So in no particular order. Tabby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Tabitha, or Tabby. I've just finished my final year doing English literature in Manchester, and I've been in the student team since September last year, so just under a year now, and I've had a great time.
Thank you. Ram?
Hi, my name is Ram, and I am in second year chemical engineering. I joined the student team in December, and I've had a great time since.
And then Rachel, if you or Ram mute your speaker, then they won't feedback. And then Rachel.
Hi everyone, so I'm Rachel. I am a master's student studying linguistics. I'm also a teacher of modern languages, so I love anything and everything to do with languages, linguistics, teaching, pedagogy, learning. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. Yeah, and I also take part in lots of the activities to do with the student team as well. So yeah, thank you for having me.
So that is our amazing cohort, and you'll hear more about what they've done and what their sort of compatriots and colleagues are doing as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. So I'm using something called a solstice pod, which means it's like wirelessly displaying it onto a bigger TV in this room. So let me know if something goes terribly wrong, because it's not as obvious as it might be. Ken, if you could let me know if there's anything in the chat.
I will watch the chat for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go.
So we're going to talk today, and I very much mean we, because I don't like talking about the student team without the student team involved in the conversation, about partnership and agency, and how institutions and individuals can sort of deliberately create partnership by focusing in on agency. We'll talk about a couple of different things about how we destroy agency. We'll talk about what it's like to be on the student team and what it means to have agency. And then hopefully at the end, we'll get together using a Padlet and build a couple things ourselves. If at any time you have a question, you can drop it in the chat. You can raise your hand. You're always welcome to sort of interject. For my student team, what I will do at all the time is just say, is there anything anyone would like to say? And that's when you can chip in anytime you like, or just start talking. We didn't have as much time as we planned to plan everybody because someone else was in the meeting room we were using. So we'll do a little bit on the fly. That being said, we're going to just go ahead and move forward here. And what I want everyone to do is take a deep breath. I love Adrienne Marie Brown. I discovered her with some other MYFest people, or people who became MYFest people. It might have been before MYFest. And one of the things I think is so interesting is how she asks us to dream of the future and live in the present. So I like starting sessions with this slide. It's a snapshot of a quote from one of her books called Emergent Strategy. And the text on the slide says, wherever you are beginning this, take a deep breath and notice how you feel in your body. So go ahead, everyone, take a deep breath. And how the world around you feels. Take a breath for the day you've had so far. And a breath for this precious moment, which cannot be recreated. Now another for the day and night come. And I like starting with this slide for a number of reasons. First of all, it's very soothing. And I think sometimes we need to be soothed. But also it reminds us about how deliberate we can be in our day and how much control we do have over some things. And one of the things about agency is I think it has a lot to do with awareness. And it can be easily superseded by people who are in a hurry or in a rush or don't feel connected to the moment. And so one of the things we're going to talk about with student partnership is how being deliberate about agency, taking that breath and thinking about it can really impact what you do. So that was just a little beginning. The next thing we're going to do, though, is get up some things together. So today, for the time we have together, we're going to talk about a few things. First of all, we're going to talk about how we destroy agency. So on the slide here, we have the 4 things we're going to talk about. And we also have off to the side my constant desktop image, which I have got so long ago, I don't know where it came from, and I cannot find its source. But it is a picture of a wall where someone has spray painted, "Good morning, have a revolutionary day," in really cheerful spray painted letters. And I have that on my screen because it just reminds me that each day can be a revolution. And you can change things and affect change. So we're going to talk about how we might destroy agency. Next, we're going to talk about how agency might connect to partnership. Then we're going to look at the library student team as a case study for how we approach that at Manchester. And then we're just going to explore, because if we finished it today, we would have solved a huge conundrum in like 75 minutes. So we're going to start exploring what a framework for student agency might look like when we're talking about partnership. I think all of those things will hopefully connect up in clear ways, but if at any time you have any questions, please do just ask. Or if at any time I talk too fast, because that's my vibe, then just let us know and I will try and slow down. Hopefully most of the time though, I'm not talking and it is the students. So I thought we'd just start with a common definition of agency. And the reason for that is because it's very hard to discuss things without considering what they might be. This one is pulled together from a number of different sources, all of which I will share, and they're linked in the slides. But it is, as far as I think, the intentional, reflexive capacity of people, individually or collectively, to imagine goals, make meaningful choices, and act on them, while holding enough power and voice that their actions can shape outcomes. So essentially, it's intentional. It has to do with the future. It has to do with being able to make an impact, yeah? And it has to do with that impact actually making a difference, right? So there's a follow through on that part of agency that may not be there if you're consulted or something like that. That's a less agentic approach. This capacity is always exercised within, because we cannot forget this, and therefore enabled or limited by social, material, and historical structures. And it can be amplified or diminished by the relationships, technologies, and communities with which the person is entangled. So it's a really complicated thing, and it's very, very context dependent, which is why we want to talk about the library student team as a case study and not as an answer for everything, just as a way to think about it. But that is enough talking on my part. So what I'm going to do right now is start our first activity, and I would encourage the student team to join in because we'll want to hear what you think there, and then we'll start sharing what we have. The first thing we're going to do is a modified TRIZ, and I have to thank Chris Milson, who's just joined MYFest. For this, he and I came up with this slightly modified version of this activity over 10 years ago, and I've used it ever since, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful to him. So the first part of this modified activity is for us to spend 2 minutes quietly considering how we as a society, institution, or individual destroy agency. What I'd like you to do is, if you're comfortable, go ahead and note what you want to say in the chat, but don't hit enter. What we're going to do at the very end is a chat cascade, which is quite fun when everyone hits enter at the same time and you kind of see a burst of activity. and then we'll go back through it. We'll read it out loud for those joining us via the recording, and we'll have a quick discussion. Before I move forward, are there any questions? Okay, so we're going to spend 2 minutes thinking about the question of how we destroy agency. Next to that picture of, or next to that question is a picture of an explosion. It's a very colorful, semi-cheerful explosion that was generated by Google Gemini a long time ago when I was having a play, but I thought it sort of embraced this idea of destruction. And you can think of destruction in terms of making something stop happening. You can think of destruction in terms of a barrier to it ever happening. It's however you want to interpret that question. So if you want to go ahead and take about 2 minutes, go ahead and put in the chat if you're comfortable. If you can't put it in the chat, let Ken and I know, and raise your hand and we'll call on you. We'll do a cascade. Just wait till I say go to hit enter. Go ahead. I hope you're all ready. What we're going to do right now is go ahead and start our chat cascade. So finish up your writing, and whenever you're ready, in 3, 2, 1, go ahead and hit enter. There we go. So some of the things that we're hearing from each other are, I think as individuals, we tend to focus on what others might want or expect from us, destroying our self-agency with it. Rachel's saying destroying agency could be seen when individuals are not given the chance to take the lead. David says we humans are tribal creatures and sometimes suppress individual agency for what we believe is good of the tribe. We do this by enforcing sociocultural norms. And Tabitha says, I think destroying agency is about removing barriers and creating space in our individual lives when considering others. As a university, when we think about the different challenges everyone faces, and as a society, when we consider the fact that not everybody has agency because of structures which take it away. Shahinaz says that there's a lack of trust. We don't have a plan and we don't take persons seriously, and that removes agency as well. The point of the triz is not necessarily to make ourselves feel really, really terrible for all of the ways that something like agency gets destroyed, but it is to put us in a frame of mind where we can understand what might go wrong in order to better understand what we might do instead. Now, if you were paying careful attention, you will have seen this already because my slide slightly went forward. But the next thing we're going to do, spend just a moment or two considering what we are doing that in any way might resemble these actions. And the purpose of this is, again, not to make you feel bad. It's to center yourself in your context, because the way we're going to approach it in this session and what we're going to discuss is doing what we can with what we have. And to do that, we have to start from a place of honesty. For this one, I'm going to give you about 90 seconds, 2 minutes to consider. And then if you'd like to put in the chat, you can. If you'd like to raise your hand, you can. Fair warning to my student team, I'm going to ask if any of you want to join in verbally at that time. If you don't, you can just drop things in the chat, as always. You don't have to speak up. Before we get moving again, are there any questions? Okay, so you've got about 90 seconds. Go ahead and consider, please, what am I doing? So what are you as an individual doing that in any way might resemble what we'd heard from others from the activity above? Go ahead and get started. That aligns with, where my room's about to go very dark. What we do that aligns with, I'm just going to stand up, nobody mind me. What we do that aligns with the issues that we noted earlier. That's going to happen every 20 minutes, apparently. I'm sure it's very much more sustainable. So what I'd like us to do right now is, if any of the student team would like to join in at this moment, we need to consider what we do that in any way resembles those issues. And I'll just leave it to you to unmute and join in. You can see everyone looking for the mute button. On Zoom, it's on the bottom. Different than here.
I'm not sure if anyone else is going to speak.
Go ahead,
I think thinking from like a university perspective and not just as part of the student team, I think as an individual student, I think there's sometimes a level of not destruction, but diminishment of agency, because I think the way that we perceive ourselves as part of the wider context, I think especially at Manchester with, 60,000 people, I think sometimes the voice that we have, we don't really see as significant on the same level as maybe a voice at another institution or a larger collection of voices, then obviously then that's compounded by other factors. And so I think it kind of brings the way that we see our own agency kind of into a smaller proportion, which I don't think is not a good thing, obviously.
No, so and do you think it's the assumption that the voice is lessened that impacts the agency, or is it a combination of an assumption and also sort of a reality that some voices are amplified and other ones are kind of left to be a bit quieter?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I do think they add to each other. I think if you don't believe that you're kind of a big enough part of an institution, then you will feel like your voice won't be heard. And then if historically factors like being a woman or, being a minority, they add to that, then it's gonna exacerbate the way that you feel.
Absolutely. Rachel, just because you're next on my screen, would you like to join in?
Yeah, definitely. Something that I've just written down while Tabby was speaking, you made me think about this idea of I'm one of the student reps, and it's true. There's what 50-60,000 people in our institution, and you sort of think, okay, well, I'm gathering feedback as a student, and I'm sharing that feedback, but how do I know as one of 60,000 people that my voice is going to be heard? Where's the agency in that? I want to have agency in what I say to help contribute and improve the wider student body. And I think it's such a systemic issue that we see across lots of departments, purely because of the size of the university. And I think something we should all consider going forwards is how do we make sure that the student voice is heard. And I know through the amazing work that we all do in the student team that is something we can come on to talk about later, but definitely through feedback surveys and just making sure that the feedback that we give as a student is heard and valued and recognized and actioned at a higher level going forward.
Yeah, sir, you've raised your hand.
If I may interject here, I think that three ideas are really interesting. I really love the idea of bringing student voice, but one thing I wanted to pick up on was the idea of bringing them into the design. So it's not only that we're taking the feedback, but also when we are designing something new, then students have to be part of this process because of the idea that many people, and especially faculty and staff, are putting doing presuming certain preferences or certain uh perceptions or certain thoughts about students. Like it they tend to say like, oh, students like this or students like that, or it would be better if we let students do this, or so these ideas nowadays with technology, with everything going on in the world, we cannot really depend on them. So I would add the idea of bringing students who are um, um, you know um, representative of every minority, every background, every culture, and someone here brought also the idea of minority, because when you also bring them into design, you're ensuring that things are accessible, things meet the sort of cultural inclusivity, things meet the environment. So we wouldn't really expect an attitudinal barrier within the environment. We wouldn't really expect something negative to be present in the learning process or within in the even institutional process.
So yes, so do you think, and anyone, I suppose, do you think that one of the things we currently do then is we neglect, for whatever reason, that possibility of bringing student voice in as early as possible in design? So it's not just Rachel and her colleagues having to sort of respond to the course as it is, but really enabling them to contribute throughout, which we will talk about in the student team, enabling them to contribute throughout deliberately. Is that something we're not doing yet?
In my institution, it began to take shape. I have to say that I've contributed to a lot of co-design co-creation processes through like designing courses, designing workshops to faculty, doing all that. And I am a person of minority. I'm totally blind person. I also I'm not as privileged as other American University in Cairo students, meaning that I am a fully funded scholarship recipient. So I also have all of these positionalities and identities that shape how I act and that shape my perception. Because when I also think of design, I think of how people would interact with this, because some people come from the rural areas in the country, some international exchange students come, so I have to take into consideration all of these. But I also think that a lot of efforts have to still be done, because after I was trusted by some faculty, by some staff to do that act. But when I leave, when I graduate in 3 or 4 months, then this issue of trust is going to be a problem here. You can't trust to bring in any student and put them on top of the stage and tell them, hey, can you co-create with me? Or can you co-design with me? Or something like that. Because of the interest, you can't gauge interest easily. B, you can't ensure that the voice is representative of all other students, and you can't bring everyone from the institution. And I also bring the fact that AUC, the American University in Cairo, is not as large in population as Manchester, and I take this into consideration. I take also the idea of privilege. We are an elitist institution. Many people have to sort of get a sort of reduction in tuition or something, and it has to do with class pretty much every time for everyone. So yeah, I would say we're trying to do that, but we still need to do a lot of more effort.
I think the element of trust is so important, and how it sounds like in your case the agency is very individualized. So it's not that students have agency, it's that Yasser has agency, because you've worked to gain those relationships and gain that trust. Ram, did you want to add anything? You can also just gently shake your head no. There you are.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I feel like sometimes, like especially with social media, like as a society as a whole, if you think of it as a digital society, a lot of young people and students in particular feel like they don't need agency, or they like don't really think about what they do. Like a lot of the times, like even like this is really just basing it off myself, but sometimes I'm just like, let me just go with the flow and kind of just do what everyone else is doing, or kind of like just do what I see on social media, or like, you know, my mates and course mates, and I don't actually think about the thoughtful decisions that I could be doing and what I truly want to do, like as an individual. And I think like with, you know, social media in particular, so like as a society, as a digital society, it's really reduced everyone's individual agency. So it's kind of gone like top down, because you kind of have these echo bubbles of like everyone with like the same thoughts, and you think, oh, okay, everyone's kind of got the same thing, and you don't really interact and mingle with all these different opinions. And I think at Manchester we are quite lucky that we get to, you know, we're forced to meet with so many different types of people, and open our worldview in that way. But obviously not everywhere all over the world. For example, at an elitist institution, you're going to have a lot of people who are, you know, upper class and not working class. So you don't get to be exposed to that, especially if you through your digital media, you don't see that either. So you're just blocked off from that at all. So that agency is kind of limited within institution and within an individual.
So it sounds like as well, a lot of it for you has to do with awareness and understanding. So your agency is diminished not only when you can't speak up, but also when you're kept apart and you can't sort of be aware of all the different things going on. I'd like to open it up to the floor now. Is there anything else anyone thought that they were doing in any way, or that they wanted to comment on, that resembles the discussions about what destroys agency? You are about to do some more creative work in a second. So if you'd like to get to that, that's fine. Anything resonate with anyone that they've heard so far?
As a career educator, I think anytime I practice educator-centric instruction rather than student-centered instruction, that I may be unconsciously suppressing the agency of my students. Now, with that being said, I'm always puzzled when a student responds either in a discussion or sometimes on the course evaluation by telling me, if I show them or gently nudge them toward being more in control of their own learning. And I have students who sometimes look at me and say, I'm paying big bucks to go to this university, and I don't want you telling me what I should do to be more in control of my own learning. I want you to, share your wisdom and your expertise and your knowledge base with me. And I never know quite how to respond to that kind of pushback.
I think it's really tricky. Luckily, you're going to be able to come up with some ways quite soon. Because the next part of this activity is about thinking about agency and partnership and about building on that. And so I wanted to, before we move on, talk a little bit about partnership and just explicitly cast it into some terms that I think are really useful to think of. So in an amazing paper, which don't worry, I will send links around, or it's actually a book around promoting equity and justice through partnership. Alison DeBay and the rest and the authors talk about partnership being recast in explicitly feminist terms of agency, accountability, and affinity. Others also pick up this theme throughout kind of the sector, and we talk a lot about power sharing, which means in effect institutions ceding power, or those in hierarchically higher positions ceding power. Accountability, both responsibility as a way to have agency, being responsible for something, and also being accountable for agency being created. And then finally, relational and connected pedagogy, the idea that agency is a community experience. It's not something that one person gives to another person, then they go off and act as individuals. It's in fact completely dependent on that relationship and how it's working. Without another person in the mix, agency is one of those things that's actually pretty difficult to define or enact. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of a discussion. Well, first you'll have a discussion sort of in small groups, and then we'll come back and talk about what we think is possible in terms of agency and partnership. So what's happening now, and luckily I won't be the person talking all the time anymore, is that we're going to look at a couple of things. The third part of a triz is always the exciting bit, which is when you get to fix everything. So in light of what you've learned about partnership and agency, both from Aram and the members of the student team and from David and Yasser's contributions, what do we actually have control over in our context? Like, what can we do as we start this conversation out? What steps can we take? What changes can we make that are structural or cultural, that could enable agency and partnership in those terms to keep going? And I want us to keep in mind another thing, Adrienne Marie Brown, who again, obviously I quite love. She talks about an elegant step, and an elegant step is one that acknowledges what is known and unknown and what the capacity of this group actually is. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start in two breakout rooms. If you'd like, we'll also create a quiet room that you can go into just to have a think for this on your own. We'll keep one breakout room here in the main room so that we can keep recording the discussion. And then we'll have another one with at least one member of my student team in it for the other discussion. We're going to together chat for about 6 or 7 minutes about what steps we can take. It is very unlikely you'll solve this problem in the breakout room. We are just meant to start this conversation. When I'm teaching, I always say, if we finish talking, if I don't have to interrupt you, then there's something wrong, right? You should want to keep discussing this. We should want to be more engaged. So please don't worry if you don't finish your discussion. But we're going to think specifically about what steps we can take and what changes we can make that are structural and cultural, but really, if we can, that we actually have control over. So not necessarily looking to others to change, but things we might be able to change ourselves. You'll be in that room with each other for about 6 minutes, continue the conversation here, and then we'll all come back together and have a very quick chat. Are there any questions?
Do you want to set that up, Jenny, or shall I?
If you don't mind, I've made to Yasser many times.
I set them up. I made 2 rooms and a quiet room, so 3 for anyone who would like to.
Yeah.
Also, I included the hosts, but they're not obliged to go if they don't want to, but anyone can join.
Yes, please.
For 6 minutes is good?
Yes, please.
Okay, should I send them now?
Go ahead. Thank you.
Yes.
steps can we take?
Tabitha, why don't you share how you and I solved a major Zoom challenge and tackled this task all at one time?
Yeah, we did a bit of a split breakout room. So I joined, was like, hi, then realized I was on mute, and then we talked about how maybe there could be some way to solve that problem. But then in terms of student agency and agency within universities, we were kind of bouncing back and forth on, obviously it's great to give people the opportunity to speak, but David, as he said before in the main room, sometimes students don't want to be in that space sometimes. And I've had it on my course that some people just want to come in, they want to do their lectures, do their assignments, and then go home. So kind of how do we find the people who represent the student body, and how do we make them, not make them, but inspire them to want to realize their agency?
Oh, so I think that's really interesting. So especially in light of what we're doing in the activity, which is about what can we do, I think one of the sticking points in this kind of work, especially around partnership, is this sometimes institutions or those putting on the activities get very fussy when others don't engage. So I think it's really important that you noted, Tabby, that some of this is about whether or not people have the willingness to, and that probably has a lot to do with their prior experience. And as Rachel was saying earlier, whether or not what they said before mattered. You can't just suddenly announce that obviously you now have agency, you're a full partner, come join us and have that fix the problem. Is there anyone else who wants to add something to the conversation now or drop anything in the chat? Ken is very helpfully sharing a podcast that we'll put in some kind of notes for the session so it doesn't get lost in the chat after.
I really appreciated Rachel, and I can't remember the name of your colleague beside you, Rachel,
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, it was around, oh, you were in your own session before. Anyway, that's what confused me. I said, I recognize you. Really good points about why to participate and why to come into the conversation. And I really, really appreciated that as an educator. And I reflect a lot on what David said earlier. I thought that was really important. And as educators, we got to avoid being jaded and that you're just here for the grades. You're just here for as the previous speaker said, kind of playing the game of school, and being really good at playing the game of school. I think it's really important as educators, and I pointed out in the comment, to not throw our wet blanket on top of the conversation. But also being aware that there's lots of barriers of what could happen when students participate. And it's our job really to create an environment of what this community calls equitable hospitality in our classrooms. I think it's really important. I wanted to reflect on that paper that I believe Maha, Mia, and others wrote, Autumn as well, I think.
Yes, I think that it's the deliberateness, I think, that can make a lot of the difference. And who takes responsibility for what aspects. So I think the other thing about agency is it has a lot to do with what you can within your context and around being able to succeed in the expectations. And I think sometimes we act as if specifically students have agency in areas where we would never let them have control. And so, where there are areas the institution has control, it behooves us to be the ones who, work to create the structures that work. Is there anyone else who'd like to add anything?
I just added a comment in the chat, following up on what we were saying in the main room, because when you were talking about impact and whether our voices are heard, especially from a student end, that's a question I think it's in the back end of all our minds, especially as students. Would it even matter if we spoke up or not in a classroom or in an instructional design atmosphere, whether there will be a follow-up or an outcome or a result, whether our instructors will actually take it into consideration when they design later on, whether there will be impact? I think it's in our subconsciousness over time, especially when we realize what are the barriers holding us back.
Yeah, I just think it's so important that we not ask for voices and then essentially say, that was so nice, and then move on. And I think that has a lot to do with agency and partnership, right? A real partnership involves listening to each other. And it's interesting that oftentimes when we're talking about staff and student partnership in higher education, that isn't part of what we do. We don't commit to that listening always. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to cross my fingers once again. Yes, this is my time to be very quiet. So for the next sort of 5 minutes, I'm going to hand over to Tabby, Aram, and Rachel to just give you a brief, sorry, y'all can't talk for too long, introduction to the student team. We're just going to listen to them talk specifically about what they take part in, and then reflect a little bit on agency and partnership within our activities. This isn't meant to be, like I said, an answer to anything, but it is meant to give us some examples and have us kind of think about it. And then we have hopefully what's a funny picture next, and then one more activity, and then our time will be up together. So Tabby and the amazing duo on the same screen. Any of the three of you can go ahead and go and talk about the student team.
I'll say a little bit just about the things that I've been involved in. Did we both go to go at the same time? But yeah, the library student team, obviously, we're part of the University of Manchester Library, and I've had a great time on the team. I've been involved in a lot of different things. I was, well, we all were part of the Teaching and Learning Conference last week on campus at the university, and then Safi, who's on the screen at the top, and I'm not sure who else was on. Farah, she's not on there, but some people were on panels, kind of speaking about their student experience. So through like the collaboration with wider parts of the university, not just the library, but the actual faculties as well, we really have like found a spot to exercise our agency and to kind of illustrate our journeys, which I think is really great, and it's really representative. We've got a lot of people from different backgrounds. We've got commuter students, we've got people who live at home, people who have moved from all over the world to Manchester to do so many different amazing courses. And I think it's just nice to be part of such a great team that, you know, we do find the space and the agency to speak about our voice, and it has helped us. It's definitely helped me kind of find a sense of belonging where I feel listened to and important.
Amazing. You don't need my permission, you other two, but if you do need it, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think for me, the library student team is all about getting students involved within the university, and not just particularly with the library itself. And even though we contribute a lot to the library and the teaching and learning team, but also in the wider context. So, for example, I am the social responsibility and sustainability area lead. And some of the things I get to work on is being part of the ES working group. So that's the sustainability working group within the University of Manchester as a whole. And we get to share ideas on how we can improve sustainability within our individual teams all across the university. And that sort of experience is, you know, really amplifies the sort of like partnership and, you know, the commitment the university is and trying to get student voices heard. So it's like they didn't have to let a student team member in, but, you know, because I asked, they really do value that. And, you know, now I can be part of the working group and part of the monthly meetings and sort of take those initiatives and apply them to the student team and also to just like students as a whole. So to me, the library student team is really just about representing students, making sure that we can come up with like innovative ideas on how we can contribute to the university and make sure our agency is practiced and respected and not just kind of, you know, tossed about. So that's kind of all I have. With Rachel, you want to take over?
Yeah, they've done a brilliant job of introducing and talking about the student team. I would just add that I think a really big value that we have as part of the student team is this idea of co-creation and collaboration. So everything that we do, our whole pedagogy, our ethos is grounded in co-creation with full-time members of staff in the teaching, learning and student teamers who are full-time members of staff in the library. You know, we literally do everything with them. We co-create on resources, workshops, materials, training events, anything and everything that we can do to amplify that student voice and give back to the student community from the lens and that unique position that we have of being students ourselves, but also staff members as well. And I think there's so much power in that collaboration and using evidence-informed pedagogy to support and ground our resources and materials that we do. And yeah, it's an amazing opportunity to see the other side of the student body, and just to give back to the student community.
So it sounds like, and I was very hopeful that it would sound like, a lot of what happens in the student team, it could, because you're casual employees and you come in on shifts and things, that it's sort of deliberately set up so that you can take advantage of the time, and also with the assumption that you will contribute in ways that are substantive, to use a very university term, substantive and substantial in their impact. And I think it has a lot to do with how we view the partnership with the student team. So they're not there just to okay things, or only to every once in a while contribute, or just to be sort of smiley pictures on a page, but really to shape everything that's delivered, to ensure that all of the perspectives there are present. And I think it's probably important to note that it's an extremely diverse team. I like saying that they're the most diverse team on campus. So there are 23 of them, and they represent the breadth of our student communities, from first year undergraduate students all the way through PhD candidates. We have commuter students, we have students who are parents, we have students with caring responsibilities, we have students with multiple jobs. And I would like to pay you all enough so you don't have to do that. We have students from like all different backgrounds and experiences, and each individual voice matters, and the collective voice is built in as well, in a way that I think is really quite important. Samita was going to be with us today, but she had a shift that got put in her calendar really late. And so I wanted to honor her contribution. She's prepared this slide. And what I wanted to note specifically is how much she values the confidence that she's gained in being able to be valued for her speaking. And I think that's something we don't talk about enough with agency, that it isn't an on and off switch. It's often something that is quite linear, right? You spend a lot of time and it builds up and up and up. And I think the expectations we have on contribution are often at odds with the confidence we've allowed student partners to build. And if we're thinking about a framework, which we're going to do in about 2 minutes, we need to really think about the confidence level and where the structures are in place to have people gain that confidence. And I just want to honor Samita's thinking about it, as she did put a lot of effort in last night. So the student team enhances agency and partnership because we have a distributed leadership model. As Aram said, she's actually our lead as the sustainability. That means she has responsibility in the student team of 23 and essentially in teaching and learning students, the whole team, including the full time, to really consider that and make a lot of sort of directive and impactful decisions about how we interact with that as a library. We pay them for their time, and I think that can't be emphasized enough. And there are equitable access to the role. There are no conditions for applying outside of you need to be a member for a current student at the University of Manchester. I'm always constantly asked if the students are like creamed off the top, like do you only take the clever ones or something odd like that? The answer is everyone at Manchester is amazing, so I don't need to worry about that. But also, no, we have no criteria like that for applying. Student partnership and co-creation, not consultation, is the model. And our students are leaders. The institution is there to support them in doing this amazing work. It is absolutely not there to be sort of in charge and direct them in that kind of way. So what we're going to do now is think about partnership and agency, and we're going to do that collectively for our last little bit of time together. But I like using this picture, so I'm going to describe it. This is a picture of something I saw when I was walking my eldest son, Nikolai, who many of you have met, to school. He is now in year 7, so it's the first year of high school in the UK. And he is gracious enough to still let me walk him to school almost every morning. So publicly, thank you to Nikolai there. But one day we were walking to school across a field that's nearby, and we saw what we thought were 4 magpies on the field, but it was not 4 magpies. It was 3 magpies and a cat. And so this picture is of the magpies plus the cat, who is black and white and looks quite a bit like from far away. It might be a 4th magpie. And one of the things I think is really interesting about this picture is that that cat is like happily chilling with the birds, and the birds are happily chilling with the cat, which is on its face like very strange. How can these 2 incredibly different species be getting on? But realistically, this is what a partnership is. Like everyone kind of getting on with their own thing, not being asked to change. No one's put feathers on the bird. No one's made the bird dress like a cat, nothing like that. But they are themselves, and they're still managed to kind of be in community together. And so when we're considering partnership, I want us to think about what it is that can bring these individuals together, us as individuals, into community, and how agency can get wrapped up in that, how someone being in charge and perhaps shaping a group in a kind of domineering way can get in the way with everyone being themselves. So what we're going to do next is we're going to have a quick opportunity for a breakout room again. And we're going to look at a Padlet together. So when we all cross our fingers, yay, this is showing up. So I've created what's called a Padlet canvas. For those of you unfamiliar with Padlet or Padlet canvas, it's a bit more free form than the ones where you see them on grids. So there is a QR code for you to scan there, and also in the notes for the slides, there is the link. And so you can, on a Padlet canvas, which is very nice, you can connect posts to each other. So you can use the 3 dots in the top right corner of the post, and you can connect and then label the posts, and it's really quite handy. And what I'd like us to do is, I know I said we talk about a framework, but there's a couple of things that I think are really important. First of all, if we're talking about partnerships and agency, especially ones that are inherently hierarchical, like students and staff, what form does a framework take, right? How do you make a set of rules that make that possible? Is it an actual framework that is a set of rules? Is it reflected questions? Is it required scaffolding? What does it really look like? And if we're going to build something that is essentially advice to accomplish, advice to make sure agency is considered, then what are the key cultural, institutional, and individual components? Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to go, I think it's best to go into breakout rooms for this. So we're going to break out into not the same people in the breakout rooms necessarily, but the same number of breakout rooms for about the same amount of time. And then what we'll do is we'll work together on the Padlet in our breakout rooms, and then we'll come back here and we'll have a look at it together and discuss what it is that we think. So just to review, we've talked about agency and how it has a lot to do with relationships. It has to do with power sharing, right? And it has to do with having responsibility, right? And seeking that responsibility. Yasser made the beautiful observation that it's also about trust, okay? We've talked about partnership, which has a lot to do with being able to be yourself in a crowd where you feel safe and also connected, whether you're a cat or a bird. And then finally, we talked briefly about the library student team, but you'll have members in your groups if you want to chat with them further about how their ability to contribute and shape at a huge institution like Manchester really impacts their own sense of agency and how that might contribute to thinking about a framework. So what we'll do is we'll go into our breakout rooms. We'll have a quiet room as always, if anyone likes to be there. And then we'll come back here and have a chat. And now I'm looking at Noreen's smiley face.
Yes. Jenny, how long do you want it to be? Like,
I think another, go ahead. You've already done.
Would you like it 6 minutes, like going forward?
Yes, I think so. 6 is fine.
Okay, I'll open it now.
There we go. The discussion they're having in their group, and then we can have a look at the Padlet together. So what kinds of things can we do? What kind of form would a framework take around this?
Yeah, so some of the things me, Rachel, and David spoke about is like the sort of expectations you can kind of set within the lecture hall with a cohort of students, kind of as a lecturer, sharing that university is about sharing opinions, sharing knowledge, not from just the lecturer to student, but like amongst yourselves. Because I feel like, when you're raised up in school, it's kind of like teacher student, and what the teacher says goes. Like you just kind of sit there, you're in a class of 30, and the teacher's like telling you things, and then you kind of absorb that, and then you go home, and that's it. Whereas university is supposed to be more of that, collaborative environment of like sharing knowledge. But a lot of students are still stuck on that school mindset. So I think, sharing that, like, probably like first years in the beginning of like actually student opinion is valued, your agency is respected, having a say is what helps grow your learning at university instead of just being quiet and kind of taking in that knowledge. Yeah, and then the last bit we spoke about was obviously our student team and this model. The student team is the definition of student partnership, right? Everything we do is grounded in partnership with staff and everybody working together for the same collective aim, and that's really empowering on so many levels. And this idea that partnerships should be equal, and that's very much how we feel as student team members, having our voices heard and enacted in the work that we produce and the impact that we have on the student body going forward. And if we can see more of that going forwards, I think that would be incredibly empowering for universities and other structures going forwards.
Abby, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, so on our breakout room, Anna and I kind of went into why is important. So Anna, I think, mentioned that she was a lecturer, and when she teaches students, especially like freshers or freshmen, coming into uni, it's a difficult one to kind of get them to understand that you are allowed to have your own opinion and you're allowed to exercise that opinion, even if it isn't necessarily in line with the rules or what is specifically expected from you. And we were saying that that's important. Obviously, student team helps us to do that. And it helps other students, people who come to our workshops, to grow. And yeah, I think it just adds a lot. And I think the student experience needs to be kind of understanding why having your own voice is important. Oh, the lights are off. Why having a voice is important, not just for you in uni, but for wider issues like democracy and for making sure everyone is heard. And yeah, we kind of said that it's not just about you, it's about everyone else as well.
I think that resonates with something we were discussing in the main room. Yasser and Noreen, we talked a lot about giving back, so agency and partnership sort of freeing you up to give back. Do either of you want to come in on that?
I think commenting on what we said, especially when Yasser mentioned that people mention minorities or people who feel excluded from any kind of setting, especially an educational setting. I think the more we talk about, even between ourselves, between people we know, whether it be in the classroom or even in any social setting, then we're also spreading awareness on a micro level. And I think also on a micro level, it kind of links to a macro level and to a higher end, in the end reaching like the higher education institution. So it doesn't, I think it should also start from above, but also from below.
So there's something about enacting partnership as an act of almost revolutionary community, isn't it? And I think the student team, you did a beautiful job of describing how it matters to you, how the way the student team is matters to you. And I think the way you are matters to other students. So that you come into spaces with confidence and sort of buzz and the support structures to enact that confidence and speak speak quite forcefully when you want to. And I think demonstrating that to students who may not be aware, as you said, who come into university perhaps feeling that their job is to listen or that somebody else knows better. I think enacting that in that space is incredibly powerful. And I know there are 23 of you, but it'd be really helpful if there were like 10,000. We could just have an infinitely growing geometric progression of student team members. But absolutely. So before we move on to the last little bit, because we've got 4 minutes left, I want to remind you, because I'm also a MYFest host, to fill in the feedback form. It's in the chat. I've seen it. So if you want to go ahead and open it, and in fact, Rachel and Aram and Tabby, you'll be more than welcome to, as you've contributed today as well, just so that we all know what's up with that and how it's going for you. The very last thing that we're going to do today in our remaining just few minutes is very briefly come together in community again and just think what we can do next. So there is a liberatory practice that is essentially called the 15% solution. And we are definitely making the slides available, Anna, don't worry. And what we're going to do with that is, this is the idea here, is that we don't have 100%, we're all giving a lot all the time. But as Rachel noted, you want to give back. When you're in partnership, when you're in community, you feel able to give back. So the way I frame the 15% solution is that what can you feel confident in doing after you leave the rooms? I think when we're here together with each other in MYFest, we get very excited and we want to do these big things. And then we leave the virtual room and we're like, oh God, I'm very tired. I can't do that now. And so the idea of a 15% solution is what can you do with what you've got after you've left, where it still feels possible after you've left the room. Not that you won't have our support, you'll always have our support, but where it will still feel possible after you've left the room. So if everyone just wants to take 1 minute and just put into the chat one thing that they can do to support agency and partnership, and then we'll round out today. So go ahead. And you can also just join in verbally if you'd like. So what's one thing you can do with what you have after you've left the room? And a little bit of the excitement is worn off. So David says, listen more, talk less. David's anything like me, that's actually a big ask. That might be a 40% solution. Rachel says, keep advocating for student voice by being part of the student team. Oh, Aram and Rachel together said it. Yes, please. Never graduate. Stay with us forever. We have exactly 2 minutes left. I'm just going to one last time share the slides because the next slide has a few things on it. So this is a very cluttered slide. On it is a picture of the student team in celebration at their 10-year anniversary event, which happened 2 years ago now. So they're 12 years old. There's a group of students all kneeling down. Well, one row kneeling down, one row standing up. Their backs to us and they're pointing at their t-shirts that say Library Student Team. It's quite a joyful picture. And they're all looking at the slide that talks about it being a celebration event. There is also a QR code on the screen that just connects you to my link tree because I am most likely to still be in the same place in 6 months, unlike my student team who often graduate and then go do amazing things. I will probably still be in Manchester. So if you need to get in contact, that's a good way. And then finally, I am terminally online, which means I have a Tumblr account. I'm also ancient. Those two things mean I have a Tumblr account. And so every once in a while you see something and you're like, oh my God, that's so right. It's also very Tumblr. So someone whose account is called Just Shower Thoughts said, when people talk about traveling to the past, they worry about radically changing the present by doing something small. But barely anyone in the present really thinks they can radically change the future by doing something small. And then Sonia Lequay has replied, dude. And someone else has added, it's the small things that matter. And I wanted to end on that at exactly 4:15 UK time, because I want to remind you that agency and partnership is about small steps, not shortcuts, and that you can create a framework, but you have to live that framework. So it has to be something that you can commit to doing, not just dreaming about. It's been an absolute pleasure. Rachel, Aram, and Tabitha, you are, as always, the absolute bee's knees. Thank you so much for joining us. This all will be on all of MYFest spaces, and we will still be in conversation. You three, if you want to join the Discord and keep chatting to people, let me know, and we'll get you invited. Otherwise, it's been absolutely brilliant. Don't forget the feedback forms, everyone. And I'm sure I will see you around. There we are. Stopping the share.